Welcome, everyone. Good morning to those who are gathered here in the sanctuary on Rugby Road and to all who are joining us online today. As we come together for worship this morning, we begin with a musical prelude from Scott DeVeaux. Welcome to the UU Congregation of Charlottesville. My name is Caroline Landis, and I am delighted to be leading worship this morning with Rev Tim. This sanctuary was built over 70 years ago on land that was the homeland of the Monacan people and that was once cared for by enslaved people from Africa and their descendants. We honor all who dwelt here and all in our congregation whose lives led to this moment of our gathering. I invite you to take a moment to greet others who are with us in worship this morning. Those online can unmute and say hello, and those here in the sanctuary or social hall are welcome to greet your neighbors, especially those you may not know.
Hi, everyone. Good to see you all.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Looks like attendance is sparse today.
I think it's a beautiful day outside.
You bet.
There's a lot of competition for church on summer mornings.
You bet.
We offer a special welcome to newcomers, and invite you to join us for fellowship after the service in the social hall. Feel free to use one of our red coffee mugs, which are for newcomers to our congregation. Seating is also available in the social hall, where there is a live stream of the service. Everyone is welcome in the sanctuary, but if you need a roomier space, the social hall can be a great option. Many thanks to all of the folks helping us share worship both here and online. Our greeters, ushers, and hospitality and logistics team, and special thanks to our AV tech, Rachel Buckland, supporting the dual platform worship online and here on Rugby Road. Thanks to our music director, Scott DeVeaux, for sharing his musical gifts. Now, here to greet you from the Board of Trustees is Renee Brett.
Good morning. It's great to see everyone here this morning on this beautiful summer day after our lovely, weary, rainy week that we really needed, actually. I'd like to welcome everybody. Glad to see you here on behalf of the board. This week, the Board of Visitors will, or trustees, I'm sorry. The hospital connections. The Board of Trustees will be welcoming 2 new members, John and Aksha, and we will be meeting in person and on Zoom. We're going to start our in-person meeting at 6. If anyone would like to join us, you're always welcome to join, or online on Zoom. You can find the link under the Board of Trustees on our website. So short and sweet, welcome everyone. Great to see you. Thanks.
Thank you, Renee. Here are our other announcements this morning. From the Communications Committee, we are currently updating our online presence, and we could use some current reviews of our congregation posted on Google and on the church Facebook group page. If you have any questions about posting a review, email communications@uucharlottesville.org. The environmental group will be meeting in the parlor at 12:30 today. All are welcome. And lastly, our youth group is looking for some snack donations for our upcoming trip to the Appalachian Service Project in Jonesville, Virginia, which is happening next Sunday. Please check the most recent newsletter for the link to the Sign Up Genius or other information on how to donate. Please join us for coffee and conversation in the social hall after the service as well.
Everybody, good to see you. Thank you so much for being here on this very lovely day, and we appreciate you starting your day with us. And so Caroline and I would like to begin by sharing the call to worship with you from the Reverend Dick Gilbert. Sit easy and be at rest.
Be silent, be still, be serene.
Put away all the plans to be made, the things to be done, the victories to be won.
Breathe deeply. Feel your body recover its resilience, your mind its bearings, your spirit its strength.
Sit easy, friends. Sit easy as we worship and rest together.
I invite Sarah Jacobson to light the flame of our chalice this morning while I offer these words from Gandhi, who simply says, "There is so much more to life than merely increasing its speed." Now please join me in saying our unison chalice lighting words.
There we go.
We gather this hour as people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together. We light this chalice to celebrate Unitarian Universalism. This is the church of the open minds. This is the church of helping hands. This is the church of loving hearts. Please rise in body or spirit and join in singing hymn number 1010, We Give Thanks. The lyrics will be seen on the screen.
You may be seated. So today we're going to be talking a lot about rest, Sabbath, being rather than always doing. So let's take a few moments now for a little centering, a little rest. If it's comfortable for you, close your eyes. Put your feet on the floor. Relax the muscles in your body, especially maybe the ones that are feeling a little tense and perhaps taut today. If you can, try to let go of the stress and worry you may be carrying, and follow the rhythm of your breath, in and out, in and out. As your mind begins to wander, or as items on your to-do list begin to make their way into your consciousness, gently and compassionately bring your attention back to your breath. Simply be present. Be here in this beautiful moment as we breathe and rest together in the shared silence. As we return from the silence, let us remember the importance of rest, the delightfulness of quiet, the peace of simply listening to the rhythms of our own bodies and the rhythms of life. Blessed be. Friends, we are an interconnected community that cares for one another. Part of how we embody this care is by making time to share the joys and sorrows we hold in our hearts. Friends, we hold these and all the joys and sorrows that remain unspoken but deep in our hearts.
This community offers its love and support to what is closest to our hearts. Another way we show our care for one another is in sharing our financial gifts with our community and our congregation. Our social action collection for this month of June is for Sin Barreras, whose mission is to empower immigrants and their families in Central Virginia with a focus on the Latinx population by educating, advocating, and supporting their needs. Rachel, will you please show us that social action slide for giving for those who would like to make a donation right now? In addition to giving online, if you would like to give today with cash or check, Please use the Social Action Collection envelopes here in the sanctuary and place your offering in the collection plate. And no need to seal the envelopes. In addition to our Social Action Collection, each week we invite everyone into the spiritual practice of generosity by giving to the ministry of our congregation. Through your pledges and with the weekly Sunday morning offering, together our financial gifts and support build the future of our congregation. This is our shared ministry. During the music that follows, you may choose to make your Sunday morning offering by using the text address or going to our website. Here in the sanctuary, you are invited to share not only your financial gifts, but also share the joys and concerns in your heart. Those online may put them in the chat box, and those of you in the sanctuary may come forward and place a stone in the water at the pulpit. You may also leave us a note on the joy and sorrow paper provided on the credenza near the sanctuary doors. Let us dedicate all of the many gifts we share with one another by saying, "We accept your gifts with gratitude. May we use them wisely for the highest good." Our reading this morning is taken from the Christian New Testament, the Gospel of Luke, chapter 10, verses 38 to 42. Now, as they went on their way, Jesus entered a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. She had a sister named Mary who sat at Jesus' feet and listened to what he was saying. But Martha was distracted by her many tasks, so she came to Jesus and asked, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her then to help me." But Jesus answered her, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things. There is need of only one thing. Mary has chosen the better part, which will not be taken away from her."
Thank you, Caroline. Always a joy. I was kidding with Caroline before service this morning that I chose that passage because I know she has a sister at home, and maybe that would, resonate about who was doing their share of the chores and all that. So I want to, before I get started on what I want to share with you this morning, I just wanted to acknowledge that a number of our folks have been and probably still are in Pittsburgh attending the Unitarian Universalist Association's General Assembly. There's a big worship service that goes on Sunday morning at the last day of GA, and I'm sure that some of our folks are there, Reverend Leah being one of them. And so I hope that they've had a wonderful experience at GA and have just enjoyed the feeling of just being in the presence of so many other Unitarian Universalists. That's one of the things I always love about attending GA. It's just that kind of experiencing the critical mass, if you will, of UU. And so it's a wonderful, wonderful thing, and I'm hoping that they've had a great experience. I also wanted to say that today, as I've already mentioned, I'm talking about Sabbath and rest, and I usually talk about this topic on a sermon when I'm about to take a little break, which I am about to take a little break. So I wanted to just let you all know that this will be my last Sunday in the pulpit until August, the second Sunday in August, whatever that date is. And so we'll have a wonderful group of guest ministers and guest speakers who will be, and some who are not guests, but who are right here with us this morning, and who will be giving us wonderful and inspirational messages. Next Sunday, for example, well, there he is. I was going to say, that ghost at the piano, there he is. Scott DeVeaux will be leading the service next Sunday. And Susan Carlson, who's sitting up in the balcony, will be leading along with Fritz Hudson in a few weeks. So I know we're going to have wonderful, wonderful worship during the month of July and early August. So looking forward to that, and appreciating that this congregation gives me a little time for Sabbath and a little time to take away from the week-to-week experience of putting worship together. So it's always good for my soul and my heart. So I just wanted to say thank you all for that. And I have to say that I need it. I need it. I need to have a little bit of space to put my to-do list away, to recover some balance between doing and being. It's hard for me, I don't know about you, to quiet that little voice in my head that tells me, "You forgot to do this. You should be getting this done. You're behind on that. Get it done now. Get it done as quickly as possible." Man, that voice is annoying. It really is. It's very annoying. Now, it does help me to make sure I'm ready for Sunday mornings. It does help me to make sure I'm prepared to teach a class or done whatever preparatory work I need to do to attend a committee meeting here. But listening to that voice, in what feels like 24/7, it's tiring. It wears me down. And by the way, that voice is not coming from any of you. I have been blessed to serve congregations that have always said to me, "You need to rest. Don't come to every meeting. Take a break. The problem isn't any of the voices of the people I serve, it's that voice up here that's telling me to work, do, work, do. Where does that voice come from? I don't know. Maybe I'm the only one in this room that has that voice. I don't know. Why does busyness and overwork so often take over my life and maybe some of your lives? Well, I think that much, or at least some of the answer, stems from the culture, the society, and the economy that we live in. A culture that puts a premium on not simply doing and working hard, but always striving to do more and to work harder. And the economy that we live in and work in and exist in certainly forces us more and more, it seems, to work harder and harder. And the crumbling safety net that unfortunately our governmental system and policies has permitted and allowed to be in place is compelling more and more of us to work 2, 3, maybe even more jobs just to make ends meet. Furthermore, our culture and society celebrates the dedication and work ethic of those who put in long days, who, pull on those bootstraps so hard. Those are the people that we tend to admire and celebrate. And then, of course, while advances in technology and communication, they've certainly added convenience and make it easier on many levels to communicate with each other, they can make it so hard to disconnect, decompress, to stop checking our emails, to not respond necessarily to that text, to maybe turn off our devices for a while. Simply take some time for our hearts and our spirits. Take some time for Sabbath. Now, that word Sabbath can conjure up images of all sorts of things. Could be conjuring up the image of what you're doing right now. Sitting in a place of worship, listening to some minister talk about, arcane theology or riffing on some sacred text. That's not really, it doesn't even begin to capture what I think Sabbath really means. Sabbath isn't ultimately about theology or sermons or sacred texts. It's not even about attending a service at a congregation, a temple, or a mosque, or wherever. Rather, Sabbath is about listening. Sabbath is about resting. Sabbath is about giving oneself the gift of spiritual nourishment, however one understands that. My favorite definition of Sabbath comes from the spiritual writer Wayne Muller, who wrote a wonderful book some years ago called Sabbath. He says, Sabbath is a way of being in time where we remember who we are, remember what we know, and where we take time, and I love this language, to taste the gifts of eternity and spirit. To taste the gifts of eternity and spirit. That's what Sabbath is about. And that's what I think too many of us, so many of us, and I'm at the head of the line, don't take the time, the pause, the quiet, just to experience, even if it's in a small bite, it's a small taste of those gifts of eternity and spirit. Now, even though she wasn't distracted by emails or alerts on her smartphone, I think that inability to slow down and take time for Sabbath is what was going on with Martha in the story that Caroline shared with us. I have to say that I have always found Martha to be the most familiar, even I would say sympathetic character in the story. Now, not that I'll ever be mistaken for someone who can't take their mind off doing household chores. I'll never be mistaken for that person. But that to-do list that I imagine Martha had in her head, she just can't put it aside. It's making her feel overwhelmed with so much to do and so many tasks to complete. And if all that wasn't enough, her house quickly fills up with guests. I'm not sure if Jesus and his disciples were invited or not, probably invited, but she all of a sudden has to welcome these folks into her home. Now I want to pause for a minute here and say something about Jesus, so I hope I don't offend anyone. I have to say that when I read these 4 verses, one emotion I have is I feel a little annoyed at Jesus. After opening her doors and working so hard to make him feel welcome, Martha asks Jesus for just a little sympathy and a little help in getting her sister Mary to pitch in and do some housework. And what does Martha get back from Jesus? A mini sermon telling her that Mary's in the right, that she, Martha, is too distracted and anxious, and that she should follow Mary's example so as to receive what Jesus calls the better part, whatever that means. Now, I have to say that every time I think of poor Martha feeling so overwhelmed and so unappreciated, part of me wants to say to Jesus, "Hey, Jesus, just this once, why don't you skip the mini sermon and the sage advice and just pick up a rag and go do a few dishes? You know, that would help. That would help." And then there's something else about Jesus' advice that I've always puzzled about a little bit and wondered about. When Jesus praises Mary and says that she has chosen the better part, I've always wondered if he is advocating for a life of nothing but Sabbath and rest, for spending all of our time in prayer and meditation or in listening to the words of wandering teachers and rabbis like, well, you know, Jesus. Now, while that sounds refreshing, I'm left wondering, well, who's going to make the trains run on time? Take out the trash, help out a neighbor, teach a child to read, heal the sick, or feed someone who is hungry. Is it really realistic to think that anyone can or should live a life just being? Well, just this always happens whenever I think, aha, I finally got Jesus. You know, I've finally out-debated him. I found a flaw in Jesus's teaching. Well, a little more reading and reflection reveals, no, he was onto something. In this case, I think I now understand that what Jesus is advocating for is not a life of all being and no doing, but rather balance. Balance between being and doing, so that we can avoid the stress and the anxiety. I mean, when you think about it, Jesus lived with that balance, because if the Gospels are to be believed, he did a lot of doing, a lot of good doing. Whoops. Sorry about that. See, too much being. I knocked the chime handle off there. So Jesus did a lot of doing. He fed, he healed, He taught. But he also took time to pray, to reflect, to be in silence. I think that's what Jesus means by the better part, is not to take time, not to experience Sabbath 24/7, although I think if one is mindful as one is doing, perhaps Sabbath can be experienced 24/7, not just while you're resting and praying, but while you're also doing and getting those things done. Now, I say all this, maybe I'm reading a lot into these 4 little verses. I don't know. And I don't think Jesus is telling Martha this simply because he wants her to be refreshed and recharged so that she can do more dishes. Rather, Jesus is telling Martha, and I think all of us, that taking time for Sabbath, for rest, and for spirit is essential if we are to live as Jesus calls all of us to live, to love the neighbor and the stranger, to forgive rather than to judge, to be a peacemaker, and to transform a broken and hurting world, to resist an unjust status quo, and to transform that into what Jesus called the kingdom of God. You can't be a peacemaker if you're exhausted. You can't be a justice seeker if your spirit is broken. Now, I'm reading a lot into these 4 little verses, and what leads me to think that this is what Jesus means by the better part is the context in which these verses appear in the Gospel of Luke. Because you see, as I was reading this story a few years back, I happened to just let my gaze wander to what was the text around it. And much to my surprise, I came to realize that right before it is my absolute favorite story in the Gospels, which I would always stop when I was reading that story and not read on. And that's the parable of the Good Samaritan. That's the text that comes absolutely right before the story of Jesus' encounter with Mary and Martha. Now, I'm sure many in this room, maybe not all, know that story. I'll just recount it for you quickly. In the parable of the Good Samaritan, a man who has been robbed and left injured on the side of the road is ignored by 2 religious officials. They see him cross to the other side of the street, speed up their walk, and they move on. But then along comes another traveler, the Good Samaritan. He stops, tends to the man's injuries, puts him on his beast, I think that's the word Scripture uses, takes him to an inn, pays the fee for the inn, and makes sure that the man is tended to. Now, it's interesting to note that the Good Samaritan's actions are especially noteworthy because Samaritans were viewed in the society that the Good Samaritan was traveling in as outsiders and troublemakers and second-class citizens. I mean, if ever someone had a reason to just kind of mind their own business and keep going down the road without stopping to help, it was the Good Samaritan. But in that moment, they saw a fellow human being and a neighbor, not an enemy or a stranger. And it is the Good Samaritan who Jesus holds up as the example of how we should live. It is the Good Samaritan who embodies what it means to love one's neighbor and to include all people in that circle of love. For Jesus, the parable of the Good Samaritan is most certainly a call for doing and for action, a call to help those in need, to show compassion, and to love our neighbors and our adversaries as ourselves. But this is where I think the story of Mary and Martha come in right after the parable of the Good Samaritan. There's one question that comes up is, well, in that story, why was the Good Samaritan able to stop? Why did the other two not? The story doesn't tell us that. Dr. King had a famous retelling of the parable of the Good Samaritan, where he argued that in his belief was that the two religious officials didn't stop. I mean, they were busy and they were in a hurry, but he thinks they didn't stop because they were being guided by fear. They were afraid of that man in the ditch. Maybe he was faking. Maybe he was part of a team of robbers who were hiding around and they were going to jump out if anybody tried to stop and help. So they listened to their fear. They were overcome by their fear. The Good Samaritan wasn't. He simply heard the cries of someone who was hurting. He followed the voice of compassion that was calling to him in his heart. Why was he able to do that? I think the answer is because he understood what Jesus meant by the better part. That there must have been some Sabbath in his life. I imagine maybe as he was traveling down the road, he was imagining a beautiful place, or maybe following his breath, something, I don't know. But he was able to listen beyond any fear or anxiety he had, because the better part, the Sabbath, the rest, was in his heart. That's what I think was going on. And I think personally, and again, I don't know how this particular gospel was arranged. That's a topic for many PhD dissertations. I don't think it's an accident that a very important passage about Sabbath is right after, I think, the most important passage for me in the Christian scriptures, arguing that we are here to love. We are here to care. Good Samaritan that parable starts with the question when Jesus is asked, but who is my neighbor? The answer is everybody. Everybody is your neighbor. And that is precisely why Sabbath is so essential and so connected to our monthly worship theme this month, which is resistance. We cannot be an effective activist. We cannot be a good ally. We will never be a good partner in the struggle for justice if we ourselves are burned out and worn down. We can't listen with empathy, learn with curiosity, act with courage, live with gratitude without Sabbath and rest. It is only the rested heart and the nourished soul that can repair and mend a broken world. So let me just conclude by wishing you all some Sabbath and some peace. If you can, take some time to put aside and get away from those to-do lists and those endless tasks. Be still, calm, and at peace. And even if you aren't able to get away or fully stop all that you have to do, try to bring try to bring some being into your doing. Right? The great, now deceased Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh had all kinds of interesting meditations about doing the dishes, while doing the dishes, eating a tangerine, and so on. There's always time for being if we're just intentional and if we just make that time. Take a moment to pause, to laugh, to sing, to dance. Seek out beautiful places where you can just be present. You know, all those things you have to do, all those things I have to do, they're important. They need our attention. But I'm going to try not to worry about them. I'll get them done. I'm going to try to let go, even if sometimes it's just for an afternoon, an hour, or a minute or two. I'm going to give myself, and I hope all of you will give yourselves, the gift of rest, the gift of peace, and yes, the gift of Sabbath. Amen, and blessed be. So let's now rise in body or spirit, and let's join in singing our closing hymn. It's not in the hymnal. It's the words. We'll be watching a video. You can follow along there, sing along. The words will also be on the screen. Here together, going forth. Please rise. Caroline, would you please extinguish the chalice? Friends, journey softly, speak truthfully, love gently, breathe deeply, live wisely, this day and every day. Go in peace. Blessed be. Have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful summer. Many blessings on your journeys. May they be filled with joy and laughter, peace and great, great love. Blessed be. Go in peace. Before Scott starts the postlude, I want to just add something to the announcements. Since the service ended up a little shorter than I thought, for those of you who want to come to the environmental conversation, we'll start at 12:15 instead of 12:30. So I'll see you there. Blessed be, friends. Go in peace.